Just let it go. So here's the question that Jonathan McKinsey asked on the mailing list. He's trying to set up his model params. He wants to do anomaly detection. He wants to do it on multiple inputs coming in at once and use the swarm. But the swarm only only works against a predicted field. Like it tries to get the best model for a predicted field. It's not really optimizing for anomaly detection at all. What's the best avenue of attack there? I mean, he could just do a swarm, pick one predicted field, go back and encode all of them, and then turn it into a temporal anomaly model, right? Is that what you would do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this comes up a lot with anomaly detection problems where you have some set of fields and you want to know when something unusual is happening and you don't really have a clear prediction metric. So I think the simplest thing to do in this particular case is probably just sort of run the swarm for a specific field as a predicted field. That should give you a sense of what some good reasonable parameters are, and then you can just do some, I mean, on the one hand you can try manual experimenting, so you can add all your fields back in and run it and see.
You mean like the encoder configurations for every field,
yeah,
the model parameters?
Yeah, one thing that's a little hard to know is the swarm is probably going to drop almost all the fields when you're swarming on one of them.
Yeah.
And that's because most of the information that it needs for predicting that field comes from that field.
Right.
And if there are other fields that are relevant, it's probably not like small relative to the value in the single field.
But that's just for prediction. The anomaly detection function does look at all of the encoded data, not just the predicted field data. Right? So it is something to try, which is just go in there and add configurations for all the encoders as long as you have your min and max correct for the input data. It might help.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you have a bunch of fields like this, they're like derived fields, like they're different frequency bins for some fields. So really, if you had an encoder for that type of data, you might just have a single field that's the combination of all these different things together. But you still have the problem of how to swarm, and there's not really an easy answer to that.
Well, for anomaly detection, we use a certain set of model parameters for all of our scalar anomaly detection models. We could just use those parameters and just slam in the min and max for each encoder and just go with that and not swarm at all, right? That may be a good solution.
The only thing, so you're saying put all the fields in?
Yeah, well, as many as I guess you have to manually look at them and decide, is this even going to contribute? In his case, he's looking at the traffic sensor, so as long as there is data for it, it could potentially contribute to anomalies.
I think that would be totally reasonable to take some parameters that work well with some known data and then just add in all your fields and see what you get.
Yeah.
In his particular example, I noticed that the results he was getting had pretty bad parameters. For instance, if you look at the scalar field for field 152, the n is 22 and the w is 21, which means there'll only be two buckets, so you can only have two possible representations.
But the swarm came up with that, right? So that's something that... so the layman is not going to realize that that's a problem. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe it's better to just use our canned anomaly detection model parameters that we used for Grok for IT.
Yeah.
I don't
don't think there's going to be an easy way to swarm on this particular data set.
Right.
I'm trying to see. So he's saying that is the predicted field. Field
152 is the predicted field.
Now, I don't think he shared the data with us, but I'm guessing that this is either a field that's not predictable at all, so just having two different representations is just as good as trying to represent it more accurately.
The swarm results will print an error score. So
it's also possible that this field actually only had two values, and so this is totally fine.
Yeah, I don't have the raw data. He gave me a sample of it that we could look at, but it's not a public data set.
Yeah, but trying to swarm over all these parameters for all these fields is just not going to work.
Yeah.
So
I think it might be best to try and start from our canned anomaly detection parameters, but then make sure that each encoder has the right min and max, and look at the data streams for those and make sure that they're valid data streams.
Right.
And run it and see what the anomalies look like. I mean, you should have identifying your data set a point where you know something anomalous happened and see if Nupik is showing the same.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good next step, to just take the data, include all the fields with parameters from HotGem,
Yeah.
and see what you get.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Matt.